Well, it's a little bit earlier on Christmas Eve, obviously, because soon enough we'll all be in worship together. I hope we'll see you here tonight. This one I'll post a little bit earlier, just so it doesn't get lost in the rush. But Christmas Eve is a special time. In my family, Christmas Eve, we had some very, very specific traditions. Because my dad directed the choir and my mom would accompany things left and right, and they both sang in the choir, of course, too, church was the most important thing. And our church growing up was always at 8 p.m. We had to be there much, much earlier because the choir had to rehearse, et cetera, et cetera. And we would do this special meal. It was always cold cuts and rolls, green goop, which I can tell you about if you really want to know. And we would have these special foods. And then we would go. And we would go to church all together. And the church service, much like the one we shared together, candlelight during Silent Night, singing joy to the world, all of the things that go. We say our Merry Christmases, and we would finish this. And growing up, one of my most favorite parts of Christmas Eve would be the Christmas party afterwards. We had this family, Bob and Connie, would invite everyone over to their house, this big old house, and they would invite everybody, people from church, friends in the neighborhood, and we would all come together, and it was absolute chaos. There were so many people. You had to sneak from room to room. The food was great. There were treats and appetizers and cookies and punch and adult beverages for those who were old enough, of course. And all of those things would gather together, and it would be this moment of joy where Christmas, that was a part of what we did for year after year after year. And then you'd have all the college kids coming home that would come to celebrate, and you'd see people you hadn't seen in years. It was a glorious celebration. And finally, my parents would say, "It's late. We gotta go home." And we would go home, and my dad would build a fire. We'd get in our pajamas and do all of this. And then after that, he would sit down around the fire and read us "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" every time. And he would sit and read us the story. The story would end. And we'd say, "We don't want to go to sleep, Dad." And he would say, "Too bad. Santa doesn't come unless we go to sleep." And he'd send us up to bed with all of the thoughts of sugar plums dancing in our head. And we would drift off to sleep, waiting for Christmas morning, where no one was allowed to go into the living room where the tree was until the fire was built and the Swedish coffee bread was consumed. I hope on this Christmas Eve, this season has brought you some joy in midst of all of the difficulties of this world, that you can look and say, there is goodness in this world. I hope that this Christmas season has brought you a moment of peace, too, where in the hustle and bustle of the season you can celebrate the goodness of the coming of the Christ child in spite of it. Hope we see you all at worship tonight, whether it be online or in the sanctuary. And I hope in all of these things you have the most Merry Christmas. Thank you for spending the last 24 days with me as we talk about some of our traditions together. And have a Merry, Merry Christmas.